Ah, my dear thrill-seekers, venturing into the woods can be a grave mistake, especially when you knock on the door of the Keeper of the Woods. Will our friends find the adventure they're digging for, or will they unearth something dreadfully unexpected? Don't forget to click the subscribe button and ring that bell icon to join us on this frightful journey. The dense fog seemed to cloak the entire world in mystery as James and his college friends, Sarah, Derek, and Mia, made their way through the thick underbrush of the forest. The air was heavy, saturated with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, a testament to the autumnal season. Their destination was a cabin, hidden deep within the woods, infamous among the locals and the subject of numerous ghost stories and legends. It was said to be the home of the Keeper, a spectral entity whose tales had fueled many a campfire story. James, with a flashlight in hand, led the group, his steps confident yet cautious. He had always been the adventurous one, driven by a mix of skepticism and a desire to debunk the myths that captivated his friends. "This is it," he announced as the silhouette of the cabin emerged from the fog, its structure old and worn, but standing defiantly against the test of time. Sarah, ever the voice of reason, cast a doubtful glance at the building. "Are we sure about this? This place has a history, and not the pleasant kind." Her curiosity was piqued, but so was her concern for the safety of her friends. Derek, whose humor never seemed to wane, clapped James on the back. "Lighten up, Sarah. We're here for the thrill. Besides, I've always wanted to see James scream like a little kid." His laughter was infectious, but it barely masked the undercurrent of apprehension in his voice. Mia, trailing slightly behind, seemed lost in thought, her gaze wandering to the trees that whispered secrets in the wind. "There's something magnetic about this place," she murmured, more to herself than to the others. "It's as if the woods themselves are alive, watching us." As they approached the cabin, the door creaked open, as though inviting them in. Inside, the air was cool and still, a stark contrast to the dampness outside. The main room was simple, furnished with a table, chairs, and a fireplace that seemed to beg for a fire. James wasted no time, setting down his backpack and starting to explore the cabin's interior. "Let's get settled," he said, trying to inject a bit of enthusiasm into his voice. "We've got a long night ahead of us, and I intend to prove there's nothing to fear here." The others exchanged looks, their excitement mingled with a hint of trepidation. As they began to unpack their gear, the cabin seemed to settle around them, the walls echoing with the faintest whispers of past visitors. The adventure had begun, but little did they know the true test of their courage and beliefs was yet to come. The darkness within the cabin seemed to thicken as night fully descended, an oppressive blanket that muffled sound and made the air heavy to breathe. The friends gathered around the fireplace, the crackling flames casting erratic shadows on the walls, the light painting their faces with an orange glow that gave their expressions an otherworldly appearance. James broke the silence, his voice a mix of defiance and unease. "So, this is it? The haunted cabin? Looks like any old dump to me." But his attempts at humor did little to lift the tension. Derek, ever the joker, grabbed an empty beer can and mockingly held it out. "Here, keeper, want a drink? Or are you too spooky for a cold one?" His laughter, too loud in the small space, echoed off the walls, failing to dispel the growing sense of unease. Sarah, practical and grounded, frowned, her skepticism warring with the unease that the cabin's atmosphere provoked. "Guys, let's not provoke anything. Haunted or not, this place gives me the creeps." Mia, sensitive and intuitive, remained quiet, her eyes roving the room, absorbing its every detail, the way the shadows seemed to move independently of the firelight, the strange, almost imperceptible sounds that filled the air. A creak here, a sigh there, as if the cabin itself was alive. Suddenly the laughter and conversation ceased as a cold gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the fire in the hearth with a hiss. The cabin plunged into darkness, the sudden change shocking them into silence. Then the laughter started, a sound neither male nor female, echoing through the room, coming from everywhere and nowhere, chilling them to the bone. Sarah clutched at James's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't funny anymore. That wasn't one of us, was it?" Before anyone could answer, objects began to move of their own accord. A book flew off a shelf, pages fluttering as it landed with a thump on the wooden floor. Shadows danced across the walls, no longer just the harmless play of firelight, but something more sinister, shapes that twisted and turned, forming faces that seemed to leer at them from the darkness. Mia's voice, when she spoke, was filled with a quiet terror. "It's showing me things I've never told anyone." Her eyes, wide and shimmering with unshed tears, stared into the void as if seeing something beyond their perception. The game had indeed begun. Derek's earlier bravado faded, replaced by a creeping fear as he whispered, "What does it want from us?" James, his skepticism crumbling in the face of the inexplicable, lit a candle, its feeble light doing little to dispel the darkness or their fear. "We need to stick together," he said, a tremor in his voice betraying his fear. "There's got to be a logical explanation for this." But as the night wore on, with their deepest fears and desires beginning to manifest in the most unnerving of ways, it became clear that logic had no place here. The cabin, the keeper, was playing a game, but the rules were unknown, the objective terrifyingly unclear, and winning seemed like a distant, if not impossible, prospect. As the witching hour approached, the very essence of the cabin seemed to shift, the air vibrating with a palpable intensity. The game with the keeper, no longer a source of amusement or intrigue, had morphed into a nightmare from which they desperately sought escape. The entity had woven itself into the fabric of their fears, desires, and unspoken truths, binding them to the cabin with chains forged from their own inner darkness. James, once the skeptic, now understood the gravity of their situation. The night had peeled back the layers of bravado and skepticism, revealing the raw, vulnerable core beneath. He realized that the keeper did not just feed on fear. It thrived on the turmoil within, the chaos of a soul confronted with its own shadows. Gathering his friends, James shared a revelation, a plan conceived in desperation and hope. The keeper wants us broken, but not by fear alone. It wants us to drown in the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. But what if we confront them? What if we use our truths as weapons? Sarah, her analytical mind racing, nodded slowly. "It's like psychological warfare. We give it what it wants, but on our terms. We confess, confront, and maybe, just maybe, we take away its power." Derek, his humor a distant memory, clenched his fists, a determined glint in his eyes. "Let's do it. Let's face our demons." And Mia, her voice a whisper of strength, added, "And maybe by facing them, we free ourselves." One by one they turned inward, summoning the courage to confront their deepest fears and desires. The cabin, as if sensing the shift, seemed to pulse with anticipation, the walls themselves listening, the shadows gathering as if to bear witness. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "I've always prided myself on being practical, realistic, but the truth is I'm terrified of taking risks, of chasing what I truly want. I'm scared of ending up alone because I never dared to pursue my dreams." As she confessed, the air around her shimmered, the weight of her admission tangible. Derek followed, his usual bravado absent. "I joke around, make light of everything because I'm scared. Scared of not being enough, of being left behind. My laughter hides a fear of abandonment so deep, it consumes me." His words hung heavy in the air, a confession that seemed to echo in the silent cabin. Mia, tears streaming down her face, embraced her own vulnerability. "I dream of a future so bright it scares me. I'm afraid of wanting too much, of reaching for something that's beyond my grasp. My fear isn't of failing, but of never having the courage to try. The air around her quivered, as if resonating with her longing and fear. Then it was James's turn. He stood facing the darkness, his voice a beacon of raw honesty. I've hidden behind skepticism and logic because I'm afraid. Afraid of the unknown, of what I can't explain or control. My cynicism is a shield against a world that terrifies me with its vastness and mystery. His admission cut through the darkness, a light in the void. With each confession, the cabin's oppressive atmosphere lightened, the shadows retreating as if their truths, spoken aloud, had diminished their power. The keeper, silent throughout their revelations, gave no sign of victory or defeat. Yet the air thrummed with a charged energy, a sense of impending release. As dawn threatened to break, a sense of collective catharsis enveloped them. They had bared their souls, confronted their deepest fears and desires, and in doing so, had found a semblance of peace. The game was not over, but the rules had changed. They had turned their inner turmoil into a weapon, their confessions a key to unlocking the chains that bound them to the cabin. The revelation was clear. The keeper's power lay not in the supernatural or the unknown, but in the very human fears that dwelled within them. By facing these fears, they had taken the first step toward freeing themselves, not just from the keeper's grasp, but from the shackles of their own making. As the first rays of dawn pierced the dense canopy of the woods, the cabin itself seemed to sigh, a sound of resignation or perhaps release. The oppressive atmosphere that had cloaked the building, feeding on their fears and desires, dissipated like mist under the morning sun. The door, which had resisted their efforts throughout the night, now swung open with ease, as if inviting them to leave. James was the first to step outside, the cool morning air a balm to his senses. The others followed, each pausing on the threshold as if crossing from one realm back into reality. The woods, menacing in the darkness, now appeared almost serene, bathed in the soft light of dawn. The fog that had enveloped them the night before had lifted, revealing a path that seemed to lead them away from the nightmare they had endured. Mia, her voice tinged with wonder, broke the silence. The souls, they're free. Can you feel it? The air, it's lighter, as if a weight has been lifted from the very earth. Derek, looking back at the cabin now benign in the daylight, shook his head in disbelief. I never thought we'd make it. I thought we were part of the Keeper's collection forever. Sarah, her analytical mind already piecing together the night's events, added, we faced our fears, confronted our desires. It was our truth that set us free. James, gazing into the forest, now teeming with life as the day awakened, nodded. Let's go home. This experience, it's changed us, but it's also shown us that the greatest mysteries, the most profound battles, lie within. As they walked away, the cabin receded into the background, an echo of the past. They carried with them the scars of the night, but also a newfound strength. The Keeper of the Woods had intended to trap them, but in the end, it had unwittingly freed them from the chains of their own making. As dawn breaks, our friends discover that escaping the Keeper's grasp is a tale not just of survival, but of confronting the skeletons in their own closets. What dark truths would you face in your hour of reckoning? Leave a comment below with your deepest fears, and let's see if the Keeper is listening. Fright fans, click next for more chills and hit subscribe to join our ghastly gang. You see, who dares to miss out, so watch our next video.